Ever get that feeling, when you're in a group and things are either like totally in sync or going completely off the rails?
Oh, absolutely.
Happens all the time,
Yeah.
right? Like in a big work meeting where everyone's firing on all cylinders or even just trying to make plans with friends and it dissolves into chaos.
Yeah, totally.
Well, whether you're about to jump into a big project, trying to figure out why some teams just nail it while others, well, don't, or you just find yourself wondering why people act the way they do in groups, you're in the right spot.
Today, we're going deep on the fundamentals of how small groups communicate and how leadership plays into all of that.
Right, we've been looking at some really interesting research and theories about how these smaller groups function,
Yeah.
what makes them so effective when they work well, and the key roles that everyone plays, not just the leader.
It's like getting a cheat sheet for understanding the inner workings of any group, right?
Right. We're going to unpack all of that so you can leave this deep dive knowing how to contribute more effectively in any small group and how to spot the different dynamics at play, the different roles people take on.
Right. So you're not just along for the ride, but actually understand what's driving the group's success or, lack of success sometimes.
Exactly. So first things first, what exactly are we talking about when we say small group?
Well, it's interesting. All of our sources are pretty much in agreement here. They define a small group as anywhere from 3 to 12 people who come together for a specific reason or purpose. That shared goal is what sets it apart from just a bunch of individuals hanging around.
Okay, so like you might have a bunch of people waiting for the bus,
Right.
maybe even chatting about the weather or whatever.
Right, they're just individuals in the same place. But if those same people decided to start a petition because the bus is always late,
Now they're a small group with a shared purpose.
exactly. And one type of small group that we're going to focus on today, and one that's probably the most relevant to our listeners, is what's called a problem-solving small group.
So this is where people collaborate to find a solution to a specific problem.
Exactly, like brainstorming at work, a neighborhood association trying to improve the park, or even, a family deciding on a vacation. These problem-solving groups pop up everywhere.
All the time. And you know what's interesting? The sources we've been looking at point out that while communicating in a small group isn't the same as giving a big speech, there are some really important skills that overlap.
Right, because in both situations, you're trying to influence others through communication.
Exactly, but in a small group, it's not just one person doing all the talking.
Yeah, it's this two-way street. Everyone's influencing each other. You might be sharing information, encouraging quieter members to speak up, maybe even trying to persuade someone to see things your way, or helping the group refocus if the discussion goes off on a tangent.
And that same dynamic is happening for everyone else in the group, too.
Exactly. It's this constant back and forth, everyone impacting each other. And speaking of influencing others, for any small group to actually get things done, you need effective leadership.
Right. And it's not just about having a title or someone barking orders.
Not at all. The sources we've looked at actually describe 4 different kinds of leadership that can emerge in small groups.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So what's the first type?
The first is no specific leader.
So like a free-for-all.
Not exactly. What happens in these situations is that influence tends to be pretty evenly distributed among all the members. And when there's a need for leadership, like if someone needs to suggest a next step or mediate a disagreement, any member can step up and take on that role.
So kind of like a study group, right? Where different people take the lead depending on what's needed at that moment.
Yeah, exactly. You might have one person who's really good at explaining a tough concept, another who keeps everyone on track, and someone else who's good at bringing everyone together when things get tense.
So leadership responsibilities kind of naturally rotate based on what the group needs.
Right. Then there's the second type, implied leader. This is when someone, because of their position, expertise, or some other quality, is naturally seen as the leader by the other members.
Like if you have a meeting with a senior manager and junior staff, the manager is likely the implied leader.
Exactly. Or if one person is like the expert on the specific topic you're discussing, the other members will probably defer to their judgment.
Right. It's not formally assigned, but everyone kind of understands who's in charge, at least in that particular context. Okay, what's the third type?
The third type is the emergent leader.
That sounds interesting. How does a leader emerge?
Well, an emergent leader is someone who gradually takes on a leadership role as the group interacts, even though there wasn't a designated leader at the start.
I see. So not because of their title or anything, but because of how they participate in the group.
Right. It could be their personality, like maybe they're really good at guiding discussions, or they just naturally take charge when things get stalled.
So an emergent leader can be really helpful, especially if the group is struggling to make progress.
Absolutely. They can provide that spark or direction that the group needs.
But I guess there's also the risk that the person who emerges as the leader might not actually be the best person for the job.
Right, exactly. They might just be the most dominant personality or the loudest voice, but that doesn't automatically mean they have the best ideas or leadership skills.
Right. Being assertive and being a good leader aren't the same thing.
Exactly. And that brings us to the fourth type of leadership, designated leader.
So this is the more traditional type where someone is specifically chosen to be the leader.
Right. They might be elected or appointed, and they have the overall responsibility for guiding the group.
So this is probably the most common type of leadership, especially in formal settings.
Yeah, like in committees, boards, or even just any group that's meeting for a specific purpose and needs someone to keep things organized.
Okay, so we've got these four different types. No specific leader, implied leader, emergent leader, and designated leader. But no matter what type of leadership a group has, the main point is that leadership is essential for getting things done.
Absolutely. And the cool thing is, even when there's a designated leader, all the members can share leadership responsibilities if they have good communication skills.
Right, so it's not just about one person doing all the leading. Everyone can contribute to the leadership of the group.
Exactly. So now that we have a handle on the types of leadership, let's break down what effective leaders actually do. What are the specific things they focus on?
Yeah. How do they make a difference in a group?
Well, the sources we looked at say that effective leaders usually focus on addressing three different but interconnected sets of needs within the group.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is called procedural needs.
Procedural needs. That sounds pretty basic, like making sure the group is organized and running smoothly.
Yeah, it's basically all the housekeeping tasks that need to happen for the group to function well. Things like scheduling meetings, finding a meeting space, setting an agenda, keeping track of time, taking notes, all of that.
So basically making sure there's enough coffee and that the room isn't freezing cold.
Pretty much, yeah. And these tasks can be handled by a designated leader, or if there isn't one, the group members can share these responsibilities.
Right. It's all about keeping the group moving forward without getting bogged down in logistics.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the second set of needs?
The second set is called task needs. And this refers to all the actions that the group needs to take to actually achieve its goals.
Okay, so this is about the actual work getting done.
Exactly. It includes things like analyzing the problem, figuring out who's going to do what, gathering information, making sure everyone gets a chance to share their ideas, and even playing devil's advocate to challenge assumptions.
So really diving into the meat of the problem and figuring out how to solve it.
Right. And the most effective groups are the ones where everyone contributes to these task needs, not just the leader.
That makes sense. You get more perspectives and ideas that way.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the third set of needs?
The third set is called maintenance needs, and this focuses on the relationships within the group.
The people side of things.
Exactly. It's about how well the members get along, how willing they are to contribute, whether they feel supported and valued, and how satisfied they are with the group's progress.
So basically, making sure everyone's happy and working well together.
Right. And this is where the leader can really make a difference by fostering a supportive environment, helping people navigate disagreements, making sure everyone feels heard, and just generally creating a positive vibe.
Because if there's a lot of conflict or tension in the group, it's going to be really hard to get anything done.
Absolutely. So these three sets of needs, procedural, task, and maintenance, they all work together. A good leader will be attuned to all of them and help the group address them effectively.
That makes sense. But our sources are also very clear that it's not just the leader's responsibility to make the group work. Every single member plays a vital role.
Absolutely. Each individual member has certain responsibilities that are crucial for the group's success.
Okay, so let's dive into those. What's the first responsibility of every group member?
The first and most important one is commitment to the group's goals. For a group to work well, everyone needs to be on the same page and working towards the same objective.
Right, it seems obvious, but I guess it's not always that simple.
No, it's not. Our sources actually have this really interesting example of how things can go wrong when someone's personal goals conflict with the group's goals. They talk about this woman named Tiffany Varga and the art museum cafeteria.
Oh yeah, that was a mess. Remind me what happened there.
So Tiffany was part of this committee trying to pick new equipment for the museum's cafeteria. But what no one else on the committee knew was that Tiffany's son-in-law sold expensive kitchen appliances.
Ah, so she had a hidden agenda.
Exactly. She wanted the committee to choose her son-in-law's company so he'd get a big commission.
And of course, she never mentioned this to the other members.
Nope. So she kept pushing for top-of-the-line equipment, even though the committee was supposed to be focused on saving money.
Wow, that's a pretty extreme example.
Yeah, it is. But our sources also talk about more subtle ways that personal goals can clash with the group's goals, like this guy Carlos, who was trying to impress a girl named Bianca in his project group.
Oh, so he was just agreeing with everything she said, hoping to win her over.
Exactly.
Right.
And while that might seem harmless, it can still throw the group off track because his focus is divided.
Right, he's not fully invested in the group's goal of solving the problem. He's got this other goal in the back of his mind.
Right. So the takeaway here is that everyone needs to be upfront about any potential conflicts of interest and be truly committed to the group's goals.
Okay, that's the first responsibility. What's the second one?
The second one is to fulfill individual assignments. One of the big advantages of working in a group is that you can divide up the tasks. But if someone drops the ball on their assignment, it can really hurt the whole group.
Our sources have a perfect example of this with Logan and the Easter baskets, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
So this group was putting together Easter baskets for kids at the hospital. Everyone had their assigned tasks, coordinating with the hospital, fundraising, decorating the baskets, buying the supplies, and Logan was in charge of transportation.
And he messed it up.
Big time. He just assumed they could take the public bus, but he didn't realize that the buses don't run on Easter Sunday.
Oh, no.
So Easter morning arrives, the group is all ready to go with their bags. Yeah. By the time Logan managed to scramble and find another way to get to the hospital, it was too late. They missed their window to deliver the baskets.
All because one person didn't follow through on their assignment.
Exactly. And on top of that, our sources highlight this one assignment that's super important for everyone in the group, no matter what else they're doing.
And that is?
Listening.
Ah, good old listening.
It might seem basic, but it's so crucial in a small group. You need to really listen to understand what others are saying, to be able to ask clarifying questions, and to evaluate the ideas being presented.
And also just to show respect to the other group members, right?
Exactly. Active listening creates a much more positive and productive environment.
Okay, so commitment to goals, fulfilling individual assignments, and active listening. What's the third responsibility of every group member?
The third one is to avoid interpersonal conflicts.
So no drama.
Not exactly. Our sources make an important distinction here. They say that it's actually good to have disagreements about the task itself, to debate different ideas and perspectives.
Right, because if everyone's just trying to be agreeable and avoid conflict, you might miss out on some really important insights.
Exactly. The problem comes when disagreements become personal and people start attacking each other.
So healthy debate is encouraged, but personal attacks are a no-go.
Exactly. And the fourth responsibility is to encourage full participation.
So making sure everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas.
Exactly. It's about creating a space where everyone feels like their voice matters, even the quieter members.
Because you never know where the best idea is going to come from.
Right. And finally, the fifth responsibility is to keep the discussion on track.
Yes. The dreaded tangent.
Everyone's been there, right?
Yeah.
Start talking about one thing, and then someone brings up something completely unrelated, and before you know it, you're miles away from the original topic.
Our sources have this hilarious example of a group discussing traffic lights that somehow ends up talking about lawnmowers and garden gnomes.
Yeah, it's funny, but it also illustrates how easy it is for a discussion to go off the rails. And it's everyone's job to gently steer the conversation back on course.
So it's about finding that balance between staying focused and also allowing for a bit of creative brainstorming.
Exactly. You don't want to stifle creativity, but you also don't want the discussion to become a free-for-all. And to help groups strike that balance and make effective decisions, our sources introduce this really cool method called the reflective thinking method.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
It's this step-by-step process for problem solving that helps groups stay organized and make well-informed decisions. It's based on the work of this philosopher named John Dewey, and it has 5 main stages.
Okay, I'm ready to be enlightened. What's the first stage?
The first stage is defining the problem. It seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how often groups try to solve a problem without really being clear about what the problem is.
Right. If you don't know what you're trying to solve, how can you possibly solve it?
Exactly. And our sources say the best way to define a problem is to phrase it as a question of policy.
What does that mean?
It means phrasing it as a question that includes the word should and focuses on possible courses of action.
Okay, so instead of just saying college tuition is too high, you would say, what steps should our college take to reduce tuition costs?
Exactly. That turns a general complaint into a focused question that's geared towards finding solutions.
Okay, that makes sense. So once you clearly define the problem, what's the next step?
The next step is analyzing the problem. Our sources say that a lot of groups jump straight to solutions without really taking the time to understand the problem in depth.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Yeah, exactly. You need to figure out why the problem exists, how serious it is, and what the potential consequences are if you don't solve it.
So this stage involves doing research, gathering information, and really digging into the root causes of the problem.
Exactly. Like our example group that was tackling college costs, they looked at historical tuition trends, student debt statistics. They even interviewed experts to get a clearer picture of the problem.
Okay, so you've defined the problem, you've analyzed it. What's next?
The next step is establishing criteria for solutions.
Criteria. Like, what are the standards that any good solution should meet?
Exactly. Before you even start brainstorming solutions, you need to decide what qualities you're looking for in a solution.
So it's kind of like setting up a filter, right? You're deciding what's important to you before you start looking at options.
Right. Like if you were buying a car, you'd probably have some criteria in mind. Budget, size, features, and so on.
And our college cost-cutting group had some pretty specific criteria, if I remember correctly.
They did. They wanted solutions that would actually reduce costs for students, that could be implemented quickly, that wouldn't hurt the college's reputation, and that wouldn't require a lot of extra money or staff.
So they had a really clear idea of what they were looking for in a solution.
Exactly. And that makes the next stage much easier.
Which is?
Generating potential solutions. This is the brainstorming stage where you come up with as many possible solutions as you can.
And at this stage, the more ideas, the better, right?
Absolutely. Don't censor yourself or each other. Just throw out any and all ideas, no matter how crazy they might seem.
Because you never know what might spark a really brilliant idea.
Exactly. And our sources recommend doing some individual brainstorming first, where everyone comes up with ideas on their own and then sharing them as a group.
So everyone gets a chance to think things through before the discussion starts.
Right. And that also helps to make sure everyone participates, even the quieter members.
Okay, so you've got a ton of potential solutions. What happens next?
Now it's time to choose the best solution. This is where you take all those ideas you generated and evaluate them against the criteria you established earlier.
So you're seeing which solutions actually meet the standards you set.
Exactly. And the goal is to reach consensus, which means finding a solution that everyone in the group can agree on, even if it's not everyone's absolute favorite.
Consensus sounds ideal, but I can imagine it can be tricky to achieve sometimes.
It definitely can be. But our sources say that it's worth striving for because it leads to better decisions and a stronger sense of commitment from the group.
So no voting allowed.
Well, voting can be a last resort if you absolutely can't reach a consensus, but it's not the ideal way to make a decision because it can leave some people feeling like their voices weren't heard.
Right, it can create winners and losers, which can be divisive for the group.
Exactly. So the goal is to really talk through the options, weigh the pros and cons, and try to find a solution that everyone can live with.
So in our example, the cost-cutting group had to sift through all their ideas, consider the pros and cons, and eventually they came up with a plan that everyone agreed on.
Right. They decided on a combination of solutions, like reducing textbook costs, starting student-run programs, and asking faculty to teach a little bit more.
A multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. And once the group has chosen a solution, there's often one more step: presenting their recommendations to a wider audience, like a board of directors or a community group, whoever has the power to actually implement the solution.
So this is where all those public speaking skills come in handy.
Absolutely. You need to be able to communicate your ideas clearly, persuasively, and in a way that's tailored to your audience.
Whether you're giving a formal presentation, participating in a panel discussion, or just writing a report, you need to be able to get your message across effectively.
Exactly. And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive into small group communication and leadership.
This has been a fascinating journey. We've learned about the different types of leadership, the responsibilities of every group member, and even a structured method for problem solving.
And the key takeaway here is that small groups can be incredibly effective when they're well run and everyone's on the same page.
So to our listener, as you go about your day, think about the groups you're a part of, whether it's at work, in your community, or even just with your friends and family.
Pay attention to the dynamics, the leadership, and how effectively the group is communicating.
And ask yourself, could this group benefit from some of the principles and techniques we've discussed today?
Because understanding how small groups work can make you a more effective member and leader, and it can help your groups achieve amazing things.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.